David never thought coming back to his hometown would turn his whole world upside down. After 15 long years in Chicago, he was finally returning to San Antonio for his college reunion. The flight felt longer than usual, maybe because he was nervous about seeing old faces and revisiting memories he had almost forgotten. He had built a good life in Chicago. His marketing company was doing well, and he had a steady relationship with his girlfriend Lisa. Everything seemed perfect, or at least comfortable. But something inside him felt like a piece was missing, though he could never quite figure out what. The reunion was being held at the same hotel where they used to have school dances. Walking through those familiar halls brought back waves of nostalgia. The smell of the old carpet, the way the light hit the windows, it all felt like stepping back in time. David smiled as he recognized faces that had aged but still held traces of the teenagers he once knew. He was catching up with his old football buddies when he noticed people turning their heads toward the entrance. A woman had just walked in, and there was something about the way she moved that made David look twice. She was beautiful in a quiet way, with dark hair pulled back and wearing a simple blue dress. But what caught his attention most was how she was scanning the room like she was looking for someone specific. Their eyes met across the crowded room, and David felt a strange jolt. The woman's face lit up with recognition, and she started walking toward him with purpose. David searched his mind, trying to place her face, but came up empty. She looked familiar in the way that everyone from high school looked familiar, but he couldn't attach a name or memory to her. "David," she said breathlessly as she approached. "I can't believe you're finally here." He smiled politely, the way you do when someone remembers you, but you can't quite place them. "Hey there, I'm sorry. Could you remind me of your name? It's been so long." The woman's face fell slightly, and David immediately felt bad. "I'm Elena Rodriguez. We used to be close." David racked his brain, but nothing came up. Elena Rodriguez. The name didn't ring any bells, Elena, right? Good to see you again. He was hoping she would give him more clues about how they knew each other, but Elena's expression was changing. Her eyes were filling with tears, and she was looking at him with a mixture of hope and hurt that made David very uncomfortable. "David, don't you remember me?" "Really? I'm sorry, Elena. I remember a lot of people, but..." David trailed off, not wanting to hurt her feelings further. Elena took a deep breath. When she spoke again, her voice was shaking. "You promised me, David. Before you left for college, you promised you would come back for me. You said you would marry me." David felt like the floor had dropped out from under him. "I'm sorry, what? You don't remember?" Elena's voice was getting louder, and people around them were starting to notice. "We were together for months. You told me you loved me. You gave me a ring and said you would come back after college and we would get married." David's mind was spinning. This couldn't be real. He would remember something like that, wouldn't he? "Elena, I think there might be some confusion. I don't remember us being together. I don't remember making any promises." Elena's tears were flowing freely now. "We used to meet by the river every weekend. You would bring me flowers you picked from your mother's garden, told me about your dreams, your fears. You said I was the only one who truly understood you." Details were so specific, so intimate. David felt a cold sweat breaking out on his forehead. Other people at the reunion were definitely watching now, whispering among themselves. He could see Lisa across the room, looking concerned and confused. "Elena, I don't know what to say. Honestly, don't remember any of this." "Are you sure you have the right person?" Elena's hurt was turning to anger. "The right person? David, how can you not remember? You were my first love. You were my everything, and you just forgot about me." David felt terrible. This woman was clearly in pain, and he was the cause of it, even if he didn't understand how. "I'm not trying to hurt you. I genuinely don't remember. Maybe we could talk about this somewhere more private." But Elena was beyond reason now. "You promised me," she said loudly enough for half the room to hear. "You looked me in the eyes and promised you would come back. I waited for you, David. I waited for 15 years. Lisa had made her way over, and David could see the confusion and concern in her eyes. "David, what's going on? Who is this?" Lena looked at Lisa with a mixture of surprise and pain. "Who am I? I'm the woman he promised to marry. I'm the woman he abandoned. The situation was spiraling out of control. David felt like he was in a nightmare. People were staring, whispering, and he had no idea how to make this right. How do you apologize for something you don't remember doing? Elena, I'm truly sorry if I hurt you, but I don't remember making any promises. I don't remember us being together at all. Lena stared at him for a long moment, searching his face for any sign of recognition. When she didn't find it, something seemed to break inside her. You really don't remember, do you? You don't remember loving me at all? David shook his head helplessly. I'm sorry, I don't. Alina turned and walked away, leaving David standing there with Lisa and what felt like the entire reunion staring at him. He had come home hoping to reconnect with his past, but instead he had discovered a past he didn't even know existed. Lisa was looking at him with questions in her eyes that he couldn't answer. David, what was that about? Who was she? I honestly don't know, David said, and he meant it. But even as he said it, he felt a nagging doubt in the back of his mind. What if Elena was telling the truth? What if he had forgotten something important? Something that mattered? The rest of the reunion passed in a blur. David tried to enjoy himself, but he kept thinking about Elena's words, her tears, her pain. He found himself studying the faces of his old classmates, wondering what else he might have forgotten as the evening wound down. David realized that coming home had raised more questions than it had answered. And somewhere in the back of his mind, a small voice was asking, what if she was right? David couldn't sleep that night. He kept tossing and turning, Elena's words echoing in his mind. You promised me. The way she said it, the pain in her voice, it felt too real to be fake. But how could he forget something so important? How could he forget loving someone? Lisa had barely spoken to him during the drive back to his mother's house. She was clearly upset, and David couldn't blame her. How do you explain to your girlfriend that another woman claims you promised to marry her, especially when you can't even remember it? The next morning, David made a decision that would change everything. Instead of flying back to Chicago as planned, he told Lisa he needed to stay a few more days to figure this out. Lisa wasn't happy about it, but she could see how troubled he was. David, this is crazy, she said as she packed her bags. You can't just stay here chasing after some woman from your past. I'm not chasing after her, David replied, though he wasn't sure what he was doing. I just need to understand what happened. Something isn't right, Lisa. I can feel it. Lisa looked at him with a mixture of hurt and worry. What if you find out she's telling the truth? What if you really did promise to marry her? What does that mean for us? David didn't have an answer for that. He kissed Lisa goodbye at the airport, promising to call her soon. But as he watched her plane disappear into the sky, wondered if he was making the biggest mistake of his life. His childhood home felt smaller than he remembered. His mother, Maria, was in the kitchen making breakfast when he walked in. She was 73 now, and David had noticed that she sometimes forgot things or got confused about dates. But she still had her good days. Mijo, I thought you were leaving today, she said, looking surprised to see him. I decided to stay a little longer, Mom. I need to ask you about something. Maria poured him a cup of coffee and sat down across from him. What's troubling you, son? Where David took a deep breath. Do you remember a girl named Elena Rodriguez? When I was in high school, his mother's face changed slightly. She got that look she sometimes got when she was trying to remember something that felt just out of reach. Elena Rodriguez, ... Rodriguez, ... She was quiet for a moment. There was a girl, a pretty girl, with dark hair, used to talk about her. David's heart started beating faster. What did I say about her? You said she was special. Different from the other girls? You were ... How do you say secretive about her? You didn't bring her around much. This was the first real confirmation David had gotten. His mother remembered Elena, even if the details were fuzzy. Mom, do you remember anything else? Did I ever talk about marrying her? Maria's expression became troubled. David, why are you asking about this? That was so long ago, and after your accident, ... My accident. David interrupted. What accident? His mother looked at him strangely. The football accident, Mijo. You hit your head very hard. You were in the hospital for 3 days, don't you remember? David felt like a door was opening in his mind, but he couldn't quite see what was behind it. I remember getting hurt playing football, but I thought it was just a minor concussion. Minor? Maria shook her head. David, you couldn't remember anything for days. The doctor said you might have some memory problems, especially with things that happened right before the accident. This was news to David. He had always remembered his senior year as being pretty normal, except for the football injury that kept him out for a few games. But what if there was more to it? What if Alina was right, and he had simply forgotten? Mom, when did this accident happen? It was near the end of your senior year. Maybe 2 months before graduation. You were different after that, quieter. The doctor said it was normal, that you would get better with time. David spent the rest of the day going through his old room, looking for anything that might help him remember. His mother had saved everything. Old school papers, photos, even some of his clothes. In a box under his bed, he found his high school yearbook, flipping through the pages. He saw familiar faces and remembered names. But then he found something that made his blood run cold. There, in the activities section, was a photo of the drama club, and standing in the back row, smiling at the camera, was Alina Rodriguez. She looked exactly the same as she had the night before, just younger. And the weird thing was, David felt something when he looked at her photo. Not a clear memory, but a feeling. It's like looking at a song you can't quite remember, but know you've heard before. He kept searching and found more photos with Alina in them. School dances, football games, group photos with friends. In some of them, she was standing close to him, looking comfortable and happy. They looked like a couple, but David couldn't remember any of it. That evening, his phone buzzed with a text. From an unknown number. David, this is Alina. I know you don't remember me, but I have things that might help. Photos, letters, if you want to see them. I'll be at Rose's Cafe tomorrow at 2 p.m. If you don't come, I'll understand. David stared at the message for a long time. Part of him wanted to ignore it, to fly back to Chicago and pretend none of this had happened. But another part of him, the part that had felt something when he saw Elena's photo, knew he had to go. He called Lisa that night to tell her about his decision. She wasn't happy. David, you're letting this woman manipulate you, she said. Even if you did know her in high school, that was 15 years ago. You have a life now. You have me. I know. Lisa, but I can't just ignore this. What if she's telling the truth? What if I really did make her a promise? Then that's in the past, Lisa said firmly. You can't live your life based on promises you don't even remember making. But David wasn't so sure. As he lay in bed that night, he found himself wondering, if you forget a promise, does that make it less real? And if you forget loving someone, does that mean you never loved them at all? Tomorrow, he would find out. David arrived at Rose's Cafe 15 minutes early, his stomach tied in knots. He chose a corner table where he could see the entrance and ordered a coffee he didn't really want. Every time the door chimed, his heart jumped, but it was never. Alina, when she finally walked in, David was struck again by how familiar she looked. There was something about the way she moved. The way she tucked her hair behind her ear that felt like a memory trying to surface. She spotted him immediately and walked over with a small box clutched in her hands. Thank you for coming, she said quietly, sitting down across from him. I wasn't sure you would. David studied her face, looking for any trace of recognition. I had to. I need to understand what happened. Lena placed the box on the table between them. I brought everything I saved. I know it might seem silly, keeping all this for so many years, but I couldn't throw it away. It was all I had left of you. She opened the box carefully, like she was handling precious treasure. The first thing she pulled out was a photo. It showed David and Alina sitting by a river, his arm around her shoulders. They both looked happy. Relaxed, David was wearing his Letterman jacket, and Alina was smiling up at him with pure joy in her eyes. We used to go to this spot every Saturday, Alina said softly. He said it was our special place, where we could be ourselves without anyone judging us. David stared at the photo, trying to force his brain to remember. The location looked familiar. It was probably the same river where he and his friends used to hang out, but he couldn't recall ever being there with Alina. Who took this picture? He asked. Your friend Miguel? He was the only one who knew about us. You said you wanted to. Keep our relationship private because... Alina paused, looking uncomfortable. Because what? Because I wasn't popular like the other girls you had dated. I was quiet, studious. You were the star quarterback, and I was just ... me. David felt a stab of shame, even though he couldn't remember the situation. Alina, I'm sorry if I made you feel like you weren't good enough. She shook her head. You never made me feel that way. You made me feel special, like I was the only person in the world who mattered to you. Alina pulled out more photos. David at a school dance. Alina laughing at something he was saying. David and Alina at a football game, sharing a bag of popcorn. In every picture, they looked comfortable together, like they belonged. I still don't remember any of this, David said, frustration creeping into his voice. I know, Alina said sadly. But maybe this will help. She pulled out a small leather journal. This is my diary from senior year. I wrote about you almost every day. She opened it to a random page and began to read. March 15th, David brought me daisies today. He said they reminded him of me because they're simple but beautiful. We talked about college, and he promised we would find a way to stay together. He said distance couldn't break what we have. David felt a chill run down his spine. The detail was too specific, too personal to be made up. But why couldn't he remember any of it? Alina flipped to another page. April 2nd, David got hurt badly in the game today. I was so scared when I saw him on the ground. They took him to the hospital, and I waited outside all night. When he woke up, he seemed confused, but he still knew me. He squeezed my hand and said everything would be okay. That was the night of your accident, Alina continued. You were different after that. Sometimes you would seem lost, like you were trying to remember something. But you still came to see me, still said you loved me. David's mind was reeling. If Alina was telling the truth, then his accident had been more serious than he remembered. But how could he forget someone he supposedly loved? Alina reached into the box again and pulled out a small velvet pouch. You gave me this 2 weeks before graduation? She opened the pouch and showed him a simple silver ring with a small pearl. You said it was your grandmother's ring? He said it. You wanted me to have it as a promise that you would come back for me. David stared at the ring, and for a moment he could almost see himself giving it to her. But the memory slipped away before he could grasp it. Alina, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. Is there any chance you might be confused about this? Maybe you thought our relationship was more serious than it actually was? Alina's eyes filled with tears. David, I know how this must look to you, but I'm not some crazy woman making things up. We were together for 6 months. We were in love. She pulled out more items from the box. A movie ticket stub from a film they apparently saw together. A pressed flower he had supposedly given her. A handwritten note that said, "Meet me by the river at sunset. Love, D." The handwriting looked like his, but David couldn't be sure. Everything felt like it was wrapped in fog. I need to talk to Miguel, David said finally. If he knew about us, maybe he can help me understand. Alina nodded. He still lives here. He's a teacher at the high school now. But David, before you go, there's something else you need to know. She looked down at her hands, struggling with what to say next. After you left for college, I tried to contact you. I wrote letters. I called. But you never responded. I thought maybe you had changed your mind about us. What happened then? I waited. I kept thinking you would come back during Christmas break or summer vacation, but you never did. Years went by and I realized you weren't coming back. I never stopped hoping. David felt terrible. Even if he couldn't remember their relationship, he could see the pain he had caused her. Alina, I'm so sorry. I never meant to hurt you. I know you didn't, she said quietly. That's what makes this so hard. I don't think you chose to forget me. I think something happened to make you forget. As David left the cafe that day, his mind was spinning with questions. Was Alina telling the truth? Had he really loved her and forgotten? If so, what did that mean for his life now? He had more investigating to do, but one thing was becoming clear. His past was not what he thought it was. David stood outside Roosevelt High School, watching students stream out of the building. The place looked exactly the same as it had 15 years ago, except now he was the adult looking in from the outside. He had called Miguel that morning, and his old friend had agreed to meet him after school. Miguel Rodriguez appeared at the main entrance, looking older but still recognizable. He had been David's best friend since middle school, and seeing him brought back a flood of memories. It's good memories, ones that David could actually remember. David, Miguel called out, walking over with a big smile. Man, it's been way too long. What brings you back to our old stomping grounds? They hugged, and David felt a warmth that had been missing from his life in Chicago. I need to ask you about something, Miguel. Something important. Miguel's expression grew serious. Sure, whatever. You want to grab a coffee? There's a new place down the street? As they walked, David struggled with how to begin. Finally, he just came out with it. Do you remember a girl named Elena Rodriguez from our senior year? Miguel stopped walking. Elena Rodriguez? Of course I remember her. Why are you asking about Elena? She says we used to date. She says I promised to marry her before I left for college. Miguel stared at him for a long moment. David, are you serious right now? You don't remember Elena? The way Miguel said it, with such surprise and concern, made David's heart sink. I don't remember anything about her. Nothing at all. They sat down at a small cafe table, and Miguel leaned forward. David, you and Elena were crazy about each other. You kept it quiet because you thought people would judge you for dating someone who wasn't in your social circle. But man, you were head over heels. Tell me everything, David said quietly. Miguel took a deep breath. It started in February of senior year. You were in the library studying for a test, and Elena was tutoring some kid at the next table. You kept looking over at her, and finally you worked up the courage to talk to her. What happened then? You came to me the next day all excited, talking about this amazing girl you had met. You said she was different from all the other girls, that she actually listened to you and understood you. You started seeing her every day after that. David felt like he was hearing about someone else's life. Why did I keep it secret? Miguel looked uncomfortable. Because you were dating Rebecca Thompson at the time. The head cheerleader, remember? You were supposed to be the perfect couple, but you weren't happy. You said Rebecca only cared about appearances, about being seen with the quarterback. I was cheating on Rebecca with Elena. You broke up with Rebecca first, Miguel said quickly. But you asked Elena to keep your relationship quiet until graduation. Said you didn't want people gossiping about her or making her feel bad. This was getting worse by the minute. David had always thought of himself as a decent person, but this story was painting a picture of someone he didn't recognize. What happened after my accident? Miguel's face darkened. That's when everything changed. You were unconscious for 3 days, and when you woke up, you seemed confused about a lot of things. But you still remembered Elena. You asked for her as soon as you could talk, but I don't remember any of this now. That's the weird part, Miguel said. You seemed to remember her fine at first. You were worried about her, asking me to check on her while you were stuck in bed. But then, after you came back to school, you started acting strange. Strange how? Miguel was quiet for a moment, like he was trying to choose his words carefully. You would sometimes look at Elena like you weren't sure who she was. But then other times, you would be completely normal with her. Elena was worried about you, but you kept telling her you were fine. David felt a chill run down his spine. Did I really give her a promise ring? Yeah, you did. It was your grandmother's ring. You'd been carrying it around for weeks, waiting for the right moment. You gave it to her at graduation, right before the ceremony. You told her you would come back for her after college, but I never did. Miguel shook his head sadly. No, you didn't. You went to Chicago and never looked back. Elena was heartbroken. She would ask me about you sometimes, wondering if you were okay, if you were coming back. I didn't know what to tell her. David put his head in his hands. Why didn't anyone tell me about this? Why didn't you try to remind me? Your parents asked us not to, Miguel said quietly. They were worried about your recovery. The doctor said you might have some memory issues, and your parents thought it would be better if you focused on getting better and moving forward instead of dwelling on the past. So everyone just let me forget her? You thought it was temporary? Miguel said defensively. We thought you would remember eventually, and when you didn't, we figured maybe it was for the best. You seemed happy in Chicago, building a new life. David stood up abruptly, pacing around the small cafe. Miguel, I heard her. I made her a promise I couldn't keep because I couldn't even remember making it. I know, man. I felt terrible about it, but what were we supposed to do? You were our friend and you were hurting. We thought we were protecting you. What about Elena, who was protecting her? Miguel didn't have an answer for that. They sat in silence for a few minutes, both lost. In their own thoughts, "There's something else," Miguel said finally. "After you left, Elena found some letters in your old locker. Love letters you had written to her, but never gave her. Janitor was cleaning out the lockers and gave them to her." "What did they say?" "I don't know. Elena never showed them to anyone. But she kept them. She probably still has them." David felt like his entire world was crumbling. He had built his adult life on the foundation of who he thought he was. But what if that person was a lie? What if the real David was someone who had loved Elena Rodriguez and forgotten her? "I need to see those letters," David said. Miguel nodded. "I think Elena would show them to you. She never stopped caring about you, David, even after all these years." As they parted ways, Miguel grabbed David's arm. "Whatever you decide to do, just remember that you can't change the past. You can only decide what to do with the truth now that you know it." David drove home in a daze, his mind spinning with everything Miguel had told him. He had hurt Elena, not through malice, but through circumstances beyond his control. But did that make it any less painful for her? That night he called Elena and asked if they could meet again. There were still pieces of the puzzle missing, and he needed to see those letters. He needed to understand who he had been before he could decide who he wanted to be now. But as he lay in bed that night, one thought kept echoing in his mind. How do you apologize for forgetting someone you loved? Elena met David at the same spot by the river where they used to spend their Saturday afternoons. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. She had brought the letters Miguel had mentioned, but her hands were shaking as she held them. "I wasn't sure I should show you these," she said quietly, sitting down on the old wooden bench that was still there after all these years. "Some things are better left in the past." David sat beside her, keeping a respectful distance. "Lena, I need to understand who I was back then. These letters might be the key to that." She handed him a small bundle of folded papers tied with a faded blue ribbon. "You wrote these during the last month of school. I found them in your locker after you left. You never gave them to me." David untied the ribbon with careful fingers and opened the first letter. The handwriting was definitely his, though younger and more careful than his writing now. As he read, he felt like he was meeting a stranger who happened to share his name. "My dearest Elena," the letter began. "I know I don't always have the right words when we're together, so I'm writing this to tell you how I really feel. Changed everything for me. Before I met you, I felt like I was just playing a part, being the person everyone expected me to be. But with you, I can be myself." David looked up at Elena, who was watching him with tears in her eyes. "I wrote this." She nodded. "You gave me a different letter every day for 2 weeks. You said you wanted me to have something to remember you. By when you went to college," David continued reading. The words on the page described feelings so deep and genuine that it broke his heart to realize he couldn't remember feeling them. The David who wrote these letters was vulnerable, thoughtful, and completely in love with Elena Rodriguez. "I'm scared about leaving for college," one letter read. "It's not because I'm afraid of being away from home, but because I'm afraid of being away from you. You're the best part of my day, Elena. You make me want to be better than I am." Another letter was even more personal. "I know people don't understand why we keep our relationship quiet, but I don't care what they think. What we have is real. It's the most real thing in my life. Promise you, Elena, that distance won't change how I feel about you. I promise I'll come back." As David read letter after letter, Elena watched his face carefully. "Do any of it come back to you?" David shook his head sadly. It's like reading about someone else's life. "But Elena, these letters, they prove that what we had was real. They prove that I did love you." "I know you did," Elena said softly. "That's what made your silence so hard to understand. David who wrote those letters couldn't have just forgotten about me." They sat in silence for a while, watching the sun disappear behind the trees. Finally, David spoke. "Elena, I need to tell you something. Can't remember loving you, but reading these letters, hearing your stories, I can see that I did. I'm so sorry for the pain I caused you." Elena turned to face him. "David, you don't need to apologize for something that wasn't your fault, but it was my fault, in a way." My family and my friends, they all decided to protect me by letting me forget you. They thought they were doing the right thing, but they weren't thinking about how it would affect you. I was angry about that for a long time, Alina admitted. But I understand why they did it. They were scared for you. David took a deep breath. Alina, I have something to ask you, and I want you to be completely honest with me. Do you want me to try to remember? You want me to try to become the person I was before? Alina was quiet for a long moment. For 15 years, I dreamed about you coming back. I imagined you walking up to my door, telling me you had never forgotten me, that you were ready to keep your promise. But David, that's not what happened.
Now what?
Do you mean the David I fell in love with doesn't exist anymore? That boy became a different person after his accident, and that person became you. And you, ... you have a whole life now. You have Lisa, you have your career, you have the person you chose to become. David felt a strange mix of relief and sadness. So where does that leave us? Alina smiled sadly. It leaves us here by this river, getting the closure we both needed. I needed to know that you didn't choose to forget me, and you needed to know that the love was real. What about the promise I made? Promises made by 18-year-old kids don't have to follow us for the rest of our lives, Alina said wisely, especially when those kids become different people. David looked down at the letters in his hands. What should I do with these? Keep them, Alina said. They're part of your story, even if you can't remember writing them. They prove that you were capable of deep love once, which means you're capable of it again. They walked back toward their cars as darkness fell. Elena's car, she turned to face him one last time. David, I want you to know something. These 15 years weren't wasted. Yes, I waited longer than I should have, but I also built a good life. I became a teacher. I helped kids. I made a difference. And now I know the truth. I can finally move forward. Are you going to be okay? Alina smiled, and for the first time since the reunion, it was a genuine smile. I'm going to be more than okay. I'm going to be free. After she drove away, David stood alone by the river for a long time, called Lisa and told her everything about Alina, about the letters, about the promise he couldn't remember making. To his surprise, Lisa listened without anger. I can hear it in your voice, she said when he finished. You've found some peace. I have, David realized. But Lisa, I don't know what this means for us. It means you're finally whole, she said. It means you can stop searching for something you didn't even know you had lost. A month later, David made a decision that surprised everyone, including himself. He quit his job in Chicago and moved back to San Antonio, not to pursue Alina, but to reconnect with the parts of himself he had lost. He started volunteering at a local hospital, working with patients who had traumatic brain injuries. He helped them navigate the confusing world of memory loss and identity. Confusion that he understood so well, Alina, true to her word, began dating again. She met a kind man named Carlos at a teachers' conference, and David was genuinely happy for her when he heard the news through mutual friends. They saw each other occasionally around town. They would smile and wave like old friends who had shared something important once upon a time. There was no awkwardness, no lingering pain. They had both found their peace. David never got his memories back, but he learned something more valuable. He learned that you don't have to remember love to recognize it, and you don't have to live in the past to honor it. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is letting them go.